Seeds of change. The sterile walls of London fertility associates felt appropriate for what Mira and Harrison were doing. Clinical, detached, scientific. 3 months into the process, Mira sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine, without seeing the pages. The first 2 embryo transfers had failed, and today's appointment would determine if the 3rd attempt had been successful. Harrison arrived precisely on time, as always. In their previous meetings, he'd been cordial but distant, attending only the mandatory appointments. Today, something was different. He carried a small paper bag and hesitated before sitting beside her. "I brought you something," he said, his usual confidence wavering slightly. Mira accepted the bag curiously. Inside was a book on prenatal psychology and a tin of ginger tea. "For the nausea," Harrison explained. "My assistant mentioned it might help." "Thank you," Mira said, genuinely touched. "But we don't know if I'm pregnant yet." Harrison cleared his throat. It seemed prudent to be prepared. Dr. Fernandez called them in shortly after. The ultrasound revealed what they'd been hoping for. A tiny heartbeat flickered on the screen. Mira felt her own heart skip at the sight, and when she glanced at Harrison, she was startled to see genuine emotion in his usually guarded eyes. "Congratulations," Dr. Fernandez said warmly. "You're officially expecting." Outside the clinic, rain pattered against the pavement. Harrison insisted on driving Mira home instead of letting her take the tube. In his sleek Bentley, surrounded by the scent of expensive leather, Mira felt acutely aware of the vast differences between their worlds. "I'd like to make some changes to our arrangement," Harrison said suddenly. Mira tensed. "What kind of changes?" "I want you to move into my guest house. It's on the grounds of my estate in Richmond. You'd have complete privacy, but better security and comfort." "That wasn't in our agreement," Mira said carefully. Harrison's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your flat is a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood with a rising crime rate." "The baby isn't really mine," Mira finished softly. Harrison frowned. "Legally, no. But your well-being directly impacts the child's development." After a pause, he added, "Your mother could visit. There's a lift which would accommodate her wheelchair." The mention of her mother's mobility issues, something she'd only mentioned once in passing, caught Mira off guard. He'd been listening, remembering details of her life she hadn't realized he'd absorbed. 2 weeks later, Mira moved into the guest house on Harrison's estate. A guest house that was larger than any home she'd ever lived in. Harrison kept his distance, but small things appeared regularly. Prenatal vitamins, fresh flowers, books on topics she'd mentioned enjoying. One evening, while Mira sat on the stone terrace watching the sunset, Harrison appeared with 2 cups of tea. "May I join you?" Mira nodded, and he settled into the chair beside her. "Your mother's treatment, is it helping?" he asked. "Yes." Mira smiled genuinely. "She's showing improvement for the first time in years." Something in Harrison's expression shifted. "My mother had rheumatoid arthritis. Before the treatments improved, she was in constant pain." This personal revelation, the first he'd volunteered, hung between them like a fragile thread. "Is she—" "She died when I was in university," Harrison said quietly. "My father had left years before. There was no money for experimental treatments." Mira instinctively reached out, her hand covering his. Harrison stared at their joined hands with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, more vulnerable. Neither moved for several heartbeats. "I think," Harrison said finally, his voice unusually soft, "that your mother is fortunate to have you." That night, lying awake in her beautiful borrowed bedroom, Mira realized with startling clarity that Harrison Wells was becoming something other than a business associate. The careful walls between them were developing hairline cracks, and she wasn't sure whether to repair them or let them crumble. Unexpected complications. At 20 weeks pregnant, Mira woke to sharp pains stabbing through her abdomen. Panic surged through her as she fumbled for her phone, dialing Harrison's number without thinking. He answered immediately despite the 3 a.m. timestamp. "I'm coming," was all he said. 15 minutes later, Harrison burst through her door, still wearing pajama bottoms under his hastily donned coat. The sight of Mira doubled over shattered his usual composure. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her to his car. At the private hospital where Harrison was apparently a major donor, they were whisked immediately to a treatment room. Dr. Fernandez arrived shortly after, summoned by Harrison's urgent call. "Placental abruption," she diagnosed after examination. "Partial, not complete. We need to monitor closely, but with bed rest and careful management, we can likely get through this." Harrison paced the hospital room like a caged animal. "What caused this? What could we have done differently?" "Sometimes these things just happen," Dr. Fernandez said gently. "It's nobody's fault." After the doctor left, Harrison pulled a chair to Mira's bedside. "I've arranged for a nurse to stay with you at the guest house." "That's not necessary," Mira protested weakly. "It is to me," Harrison said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then, more softly, "Please, Mira." 3 days of hospital observation followed before Mira was released back to the guest house. True to Harrison's word, a nurse named Josephine was installed in the adjoining room, but she wasn't Mira's only constant companion. Harrison worked from home, appearing throughout the day with fresh fruit, gentle inquiries, and increasingly unguarded conversation. On the 7th day of her bed rest, Harrison arrived with a chess set. "I thought you might be bored," he explained, setting up the pieces. "I haven't played since university," Mira warned, Harrison's mouth curved in a rare smile. "I'll go easy on you." He didn't, and Mira lost spectacularly, but she found herself laughing for the first time in weeks. Harrison's eyes crinkled at the corners when he genuinely smiled, she discovered, a detail that seemed strangely precious. As weeks passed, their evening chess games became a ritual. One night, after particularly competitive play, Harrison captured her queen with a triumphant checkmate in 3 moves. "Show off," Mira teased, and their eyes met across the board. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had acknowledged. Harrison reached across the chessboard, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected tenderness. "Mira," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" she whispered, though she knew. "Care about someone again." The admission seemed to cost him. This was supposed to be straightforward, a contract, a child, not feelings, Mira supplied. Harrison nodded, his expression conflicted. "When I got your call that night, and I thought something might happen to you, to both of you, I realized this stopped being just business a long time ago." Before Mira could respond, her phone rang. It was her mother's caregiver. "Mira, your mother's had a fall. We're at St. Thomas's Hospital." As Harrison drove her to see her mother, Mira stared out the window, her thoughts in turmoil. She was carrying his child, developing feelings she hadn't planned for, and now her mother, her reason for this entire arrangement, needed her too. "Whatever happens," Harrison said quietly as they pulled up to the hospital, "you're not alone in this anymore." The simple promise brought tears to her eyes, even as she wondered if Harrison Wells was capable of keeping it when emotions, not contracts, were involved. Breaking Point Mira's mother recovered from her fall with nothing worse than a sprained wrist, but the incident left Mira shaken. At 28 weeks pregnant, the reality of her situation pressed in from all sides. She was living in Harrison's guest house, carrying his child, and falling for a man who had explicitly stated he wanted no emotional entanglements. Harrison had been different since their almost confession over the chessboard, more attentive, less guarded. He'd moved her mother into another guest suite on his estate, for easier monitoring of her condition, though Mira suspected it was as much for her peace of mind as for her mother's health. One evening, Harrison invited both Mira and her mother to dinner in the main house, the first time he'd made such an overture. His sprawling mansion was tastefully decorated but impersonal, like an architectural magazine spread rather than a home. "This place needs a woman's touch," Mira's mother, Vivian, commented with characteristic bluntness over dessert. Harrison looked, startled, then thoughtful. "Perhaps it does." Later, after Vivian retired to her suite, Harrison led Mira to his study. "There's something I need to show you." He unlocked a drawer and withdrew a thick folder. "My ex-wife, Rebecca. I've never told you the full story." Mira sat carefully on the leather sofa as Harrison explained how his college sweetheart had married him just as his first tech venture was taking off. How she'd stood by him through the lean years, only to file for divorce the day after his company went public with a valuation of billions. "She was having an affair with my chief financial officer," Harrison said flatly. Together, they'd been planning to take control of the company once she received her divorce settlement. "I only discovered their plan because my security team caught them discussing it." "I'm so sorry," Mira said softly. Harrison's laugh was bitter. "The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I'd never really known her, that everything had been calculation on her part." He handed Mira a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Tech Titans Ex-Weds, Former CFO, Day After Divorce Settlement." "So you decided never to trust anyone again," Mira concluded. "I decided business arrangements were cleaner. No false pretenses." Harrison's gaze was intense. "Until you." Before Mira could respond, Harrison's phone rang. His expression darkened as he answered. "Wells." The one-sided conversation that followed made little sense to Mira, but Harrison's increasingly tense posture told her something was very wrong. "I'll handle it," he said finally, ending the call. He turned to Mira, his expression closed once more. "Rebecca's back in London, with lawyers. She's contesting our divorce settlement and—" He hesitated. "She somehow found out about the baby." "What does that mean for us?" Mira asked, one hand protectively covering her swollen belly. "She's threatening to go to the tabloids, to paint me as—" He struggled with the words. "As a man who purchases women and children. She's demanding a new settlement to keep quiet." "That's blackmail," Mira gasped. "That's Rebecca," Harrison said grimly. The next morning, while Harrison was locked in meetings with his legal team, a sleek town car pulled up to the guest house. A striking woman with cold blue eyes and a perfect blowout stepped out. "You must be the surrogate," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I'm Rebecca Wells." "It's Rebecca Turner now, isn't it?" Mira replied evenly. "And you're trespassing." Rebecca laughed. Feisty, not Harrison's usual type. She glanced at Mira's pregnant figure. "Though I suppose you're just the incubator, not the girlfriend." "What do you want?" Mira asked directly. "To give you some friendly advice. Harrison doesn't do love, he does ownership. Whatever he's promised you. However he's making you feel special. It's temporary. Once you've given him what he wants, you'll be discarded." "Like you discarded him?" Mira countered. Rebecca's smile faltered. "I was young and stupid when I married him. By the time I realized what a cold, controlling bastard he really is, I was trapped. I did what I had to do to escape, including sleeping with his best friend and trying to steal his company." Mira hadn't meant to reveal how much she knew, but the words slipped out. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "He's told you his version, I see. Did he mention the prenuptial agreement that would have left me with nothing if I'd simply filed for divorce? Or the way he tracked my every movement, controlled every aspect of our lives?" Doubt flickered through Mira's mind. Harrison was intensely private, sometimes controlling in his concern for her and the baby. Could there be truth in Rebecca's accusations? I think you should leave, Mira said firmly. Rebecca handed her a business card. When you realize I'm right, call me. We could help each other. After she left, Mira sat trembling, Rebecca's poisonous words echoing in her mind. When Harrison returned that evening, his face was drawn with tension. Rebecca came to see me today, Mira said without preamble. Harrison froze. What did she say? As Mira recounted the conversation, Harrison's expression grew darker. None of it is true, he said when she finished. I never controlled her. I trusted her completely. That was my mistake. Then why did she need to escape? Mira asked quietly. Because the prenup had a fidelity clause. If she'd been caught cheating, she'd have gotten nothing. Harrison ran a hand through his hair. She needed me to file first, or to create grounds for her to claim emotional distress. He looked at Mira, raw vulnerability in his eyes. Do you believe her? The question hung between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Mira realized she was at a crossroads. Trust the man who had gradually revealed his wounded heart to her, or heed the warnings of the woman who knew him first. I don't know what to believe anymore, Mira whispered, and watched something break in Harrison's eyes. The proposition Mira Calloway clutched her coffee cup as if it might shield her from the opulence of the Mayfair Hotel lobby. 26 years old with a psychology degree that had earned her nothing but student debt, she sat ramrod straight in her second-hand dress trying to look like she belonged. The weight of her mother's mounting medical bills pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Miss Calloway? She looked up to find a tall man with steel-gray eyes watching her. Harrison Wells didn't smile as he extended his hand. At 40, his dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his tailored suit probably cost more than her rent for 6 months. Mr. Wells, she replied, rising to shake his hand. His grip was firm but brief, as if he avoided unnecessary contact. Shall we? He gestured toward the private dining room he'd reserved. Once seated, a waiter appeared and disappeared with practiced invisibility. Harrison studied her with the calculating gaze of a man who'd built a tech empire from nothing. Your application was different from the others, he said finally. Most women who apply to be surrogates have children of their own. You don't. Mira took a careful sip of water. I was honest about that in my forms. Why would someone with no experience of motherhood want to carry a child for a stranger? His tone wasn't accusatory, merely curious. My mother has multiple sclerosis. The new treatments aren't covered by insurance. Mira met his gaze directly. I won't pretend this is some calling. I need the money. Something in his expression shifted. Refreshingly honest. I don't see the point in pretending. She set down her glass. But I should be clear. I've never done anything like this before. You mean surrogacy? I mean... Mira felt heat creep into her cheeks. I've never been in a serious relationship. My mother's illness meant I grew up fast, focused, on school. Dating wasn't a priority. Harrison leaned back, studying her with new interest. The agency said you passed all the psychological evaluations with exceptional results. I'm stable, Mr. Wells, just inexperienced. Call me Harrison. He paused. My situation is unusual as well. After my divorce 3 years ago, I decided traditional relationships weren't compatible with my life. But I want a child, an heir for what I've built. No co-parent? Mira asked. No, just me. His jaw tightened. My ex-wife taught me the danger of involving emotions in business arrangements. Mira nodded slowly. So we're clear. This would be a gestational surrogacy, your sperm, donor eggs? Yes, everything handled medically. Professional. Harrison slid a folder across the table. My lawyers have prepared this contract. The compensation is on page 3. Mira's eyes widened at the figure. It would cover her mother's treatments for years. Why me? She asked suddenly. There must be dozens of women with more experience. Harrison's expression was unreadable. You were honest about your motivations. I respect that. And your background check was impeccable. No hidden agendas, no drama. Just a daughter trying to save her mother, Mira murmured. For the first time, his expression softened slightly. We all have our reasons, Miss Calloway. Mira, she corrected. Harrison nodded. Take the contract home. Review it with a lawyer. I'll cover the cost. If you agree, we begin next month. As she left the hotel, contract tucked safely in her bag, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal that would change far more than her bank balance. Harrison Wells wanted a clinical arrangement, a business transaction creating new life. What neither of them realized was how impossible it would be to keep hearts uninvolved when creating something so fundamentally human. Rewritten contract. The tension following Rebecca's visit lingered like a storm cloud. Harrison retreated behind his walls, attending appointments with cordial detachment, while Mira wrestled with doubts. Rebecca's business card sat on her nightstand, untouched but ever present. At 34 weeks pregnant, Mira waddled into the main house one afternoon, looking for a book she'd left in the library. She paused at the sound of voices from Harrison's study. You need to counter Rebecca's claims. Directly, a male voice insisted. Your silence makes you look guilty. I won't drag Mira into a public spectacle, Harrison replied firmly. The press would hound her, invade her privacy, stress her and the baby. Then what's your plan? The other man asked. I'll pay Rebecca what she wants, Harrison said, resignation clear in his voice. Again? Harrison, that's exactly what she expects. She'll keep coming back. I don't care. Mira's peace of mind, her well-being, is worth any price. Mira's hand flew to her mouth. Harrison was willing to capitulate to his ex-wife's demands, not to protect himself, but to shield her from scrutiny and stress. She left silently, her mind whirling. That night she made a decision. Taking Rebecca's card, she placed a call. 2 days later, Mira sat across from Rebecca in a quiet cafe. I knew you'd call, Rebecca said smugly. Has he shown his true colors yet? Actually, Mira said calmly, I've seen who Harrison really is quite clearly. She placed a folder on the table. As have several investigators. Rebecca's smile faltered. What is this? Documentation of your systematic fraud. Copies of emails. Between you and Michael Dawson detailing your plan to emotionally manipulate Harrison into filing for divorce. Bank records showing how you funneled company resources to offshore accounts. Color drained from Rebecca's face. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter. What matters is that Harrison has had this evidence for years and never used it. He could have had you prosecuted, but he chose to let you walk away. Mira leaned forward. He's a better person than you ever gave him credit for. What do you want? Rebecca asked, her voice tight. Leave Harrison alone, permanently. Or these files go to the police and the press. Rebecca studied her with new respect. You're in love with him. Mira didn't deny it. Do we have an understanding? After Rebecca left, Mira texted Harrison. We need to talk. Meet me at the willow tree by the pond. It was their spot, where they'd walked countless times during her pregnancy, where she'd felt the baby kick for the first time and had instinctively reached for Harrison's hand to feel it, too. He was waiting when she arrived, his face guarded. Your message sounded serious. It is. Mira took a deep breath. I met with Rebecca today. Harrison's expression darkened. Mira, let me finish. I told her to back off permanently. I had leverage. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The evidence. You found it in my study. Mira nodded. You never used it against her, even when she tried to destroy you. It would have meant a public scandal. Jail time for her. Harrison shrugged. I just wanted her gone from my life. No, Mira said softly. You wanted to protect her despite everything. Because that's who you are, Harrison. You protect the people you care about, sometimes to your own detriment. His eyes searched hers. Like I'm trying to protect you? Yes. But here's what I've realized. I don't need protection. I need partnership. Mira took his hand and placed it on her belly, where the baby was kicking vigorously. We both do. Harrison's carefully maintained control crumbled. I'm afraid, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Not of Rebecca or scandal. I'm afraid of how much I've come to need you. Both of you. The contract we signed, Mira said, it doesn't account for this, for us becoming a family. Family, Harrison repeated, as if testing the word. I haven't had a real family since my mother died. Neither have I, except for my mother. Mira took his hand. But this baby will need both of us. And I think we need each other too. Harrison pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her pregnant belly between them. I never planned for you, Mira Calloway. You were supposed to be a simple solution to continuing my legacy. And you were supposed to be a way to save my mother, Mira replied, smiling through tears. We were both wrong. The baby will be here in a few weeks, Harrison said, a note of wonder in his voice. Our child, Mira agreed, which means we need a new agreement. Not a surrogacy contract, but a promise. Harrison brushed a tender kiss against her forehead. What kind of promise? To try, to trust, to build something real even though it scares us both. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking for forever right now, just for a chance. Harrison's answer was to lower his mouth to hers in their first kiss, gentle, questioning, and full of promise. When they parted, his smile was without reservation for the first time since she'd known him. I think, he said softly, that we've already begun. 2 weeks later, when their daughter arrived with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair, the birth certificate listed both their names as parents. The document they signed wasn't a surrogacy completion form, but a different kind of contract altogether. One written not with legal jargon, but with hope, trust, and the beginnings of love. Mira watched from her hospital bed as Harrison held their daughter with awe and tenderness. He looked up, catching her gaze. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Mira asked. For showing me that some risks are worth taking. He smiled, the love in his eyes unmistakable. And that the most important. Contracts aren't signed on paper at all.